Hey guys, so today's video is an introduction to the Second Crusade, which lasted from 1145 to 1149, and it's just going to be a brief summary of what happened in the Second Crusade and what you need to know about it. So what do you need to know? So the causes of the Second Crusade, how successful the Second Crusade was, consequences of the Second Crusade, and the IB guide also specifies that you need to know the successes and failures of both sides during the Crusades. So you need to know the successes and failures for both the Frankish side and for the Muslims. And don't be too worried by this, because this is often the flip side of a failure from one side, and you can just use it for your other argument in your essay or yeah. So the build up to the Second Crusade. So in 1144, Edessa was captured by Zengi, also known as Nur al-Din, who came from the Zengid dynasty, and he was a fierce and violent warlord from the Muslim world. The Crusaders were in shock when Edessa fell, because it was the first Crusader state to fall, and it was supposedly really strong, and it just came as a surprise, and the loss of Edessa demonstrated how weak the new generation of rulers in the West had become, and this was a key cause to the Second Crusade, because the Crusaders wanted to regain Edessa, and it was led by Louis VII of France and Conrad III of Germany. So this is a brief timeline of the Second Crusade, and it shows the route that the leaders took to get to the Near East, also known as the Holy Land. So the enthusiasm of the Crusaders had dipped since the First Crusade, which may have been a reason why it ended in a failure for them. And both armies, as you can see on the map, went on land, even though the sea route would have been faster. This was a tactical mistake, but they did this because they wanted to mimic the route of the First Crusade. And this was a terrible idea, because both Louis VII and Conrad III were poor military leaders, and weren't as experienced as the leaders that were on the First Crusade. So they didn't really have a plan. Edessa was long gone and hard to recapture, because the Muslim forces were now really, really strong, and they didn't know what they were going to do because Zengi was dead, and they wanted to attack Damascus because it was strategically important and wealthy. As you can see, Louis VII went straight to Damascus, but this ended in a failure. The siege of Damascus was a fiasco and ended within a week, because the Crusaders broke up and Louis VII stayed to tour the religious sites, so clearly he didn't really care. So a summary of the Second Crusade. The main causes was the fall of Edessa to Muslim forces in 1144, and the change in Muslim power due to the rise of Zengi, because now the Muslim forces were united, unlike how they were in the First Crusade. The consequences was a failure for the Christians, but a success for the Muslims, because Edessa remained in Muslim hands. It was a long-term cause for the Third Crusade. However, there was some successes in Portugal, widening the Christian crusade ideology, because the Crusaders had two interesting achievements, which was first, the English and Flemish Crusaders conquered the Islamic city of Lisbon, which was a very wealthy city. Also, German nobles asked the Pope to attack Baltic pagans, and this began a pattern of crusading against pagans, and led to more crusades around the world. So the significant individuals of the Second Crusade were Zengi, Nur al-Din, and Imad al-Din, which are from the Zengid Empire, as I mentioned before. Also, Pope Eugene III, also known as Eugenius III, Louis VII of France, and Conrad III of Germany, who was the Holy Roman Emperor, and Manuel I Komnenos, who was the Byzantine Emperor and helped the Crusaders cross through modern-day Turkey. And when you compare it to the First Crusade, there was some similarities, which were that they were both announced by a pope. They had the same religious context, Christians versus Muslims, and they were both headed to the Holy Land. However, the differences were that the Second Crusade was led by kings who weren't as experienced as the military leaders who led the First Crusade, and there was different outcomes because the Second Crusade ended in a Muslim victory and a Christian failure. So if you would like to further your knowledge on the Second Crusade, this podcast is really useful if you just want a summary with more details for when you make notes, and the link for this will be in the caption below. And in the next videos, I'll be explaining the key causes in more depth that led to the Second Crusade, also the events of the Second Crusade, and the key consequences and the aftermath of the Second Crusade. Thank you.